Everyone laughed at me during the reading of the will, until I placed the red folder on the table. The lawyer's voice faltered mid-sentence as 7 pairs of eyes locked onto the worn leather portfolio. My cousin Rebecca's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Uncle Stuart's smug grin collapsed. My sister Vanessa's perfectly manicured nails dug into the armrest of her chair. I'd spent 29 years being Emily Carter, the family disappointment. The one who just doesn't apply herself. The one who lacks ambition. The one who would be pretty if she tried harder. And in that moment, watching their faces transition from mockery to fear, I realized I'd been waiting for this day my entire life. "Please continue, Mr. Burnham," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. The folder remained untouched before me, its contents still secret, the only inheritance my grandfather had guaranteed me. The lawyer cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and resumed reading. "To my granddaughter Emily, I leave my personal library and the sum of $5,000. The tension in the room dissolved into poorly concealed snickers. $5,000 and some dusty books. While my sister inherited the summer house, my cousins received investment portfolios, and my uncles split ownership of the family business. Exactly what everyone expected. Poor Emily, Aunt Patricia whispered loudly enough for me to hear. At least she can sell the books." I traced my finger along the edge of the folder, feeling the slight ridge where a paper was folded inside. Grandfather had handed it to me 3 days before he died, his liver-spotted hand trembling with the effort. "This is more valuable than anything else I own," he'd said, his voice a raspy whisper. "Wait until the reading. They need to see you have it." The lawyer finished, closing the heavy binder that held my grandfather's last wishes. "Unless there are questions, this concludes the formal reading of the will." My Uncle Stuart stood, straightening his Italian suit. "Well, that's that. Emily, don't worry about moving those books yourself. I'll have someone box them up for you." His false generosity made my stomach turn. The same man who'd told my grandfather I was too emotional to handle any real responsibility in the family business now couldn't wait to clear out the library, the room that had been my sanctuary growing up. "Actually," I said, standing and finally opening the red folder, "I have something everyone should see." The room went silent again. I withdrew a single document, yellowed with age, and slid it toward Mr. Burnham. "This is a contract," I explained, watching the lawyer's eyebrows rise as he scanned it. "Dated 15 years ago. It shows that grandfather's original invention, the filter technology that built Carter Industries, was co-created with my father before he died. My father, the family black sheep who died when I was 14, whose memory had been systematically erased from family photographs and conversations. And as his sole heir, I own 50% of the patent rights. Which means I own 50% of the company." Uncle Stuart lunged for the document. "This is absurd. A forgery." Mr. Burnham held it away from him. "This appears genuine, Mr. Carter. The signatures and notary seal are intact." My sister Vanessa stood, her face flushed with anger beneath her perfect makeup. "This isn't fair. You've never shown any interest in the business." I smiled at her, remembering all the times she'd excluded me from family events, all the times she'd told my grandfather I wasn't Carter material. "That's where you're wrong, Vanessa. I've spent the last 7 years earning my MBA at night while working as a mere administrative assistant at our biggest competitor. I know exactly how this business works." The revelation hung in the air like smoke. My grandfather's final chess move had been to place me in a position of power over the very people who'd dismissed me my entire life. I collected the document and returned it to my folder. "I'll have my lawyer contact you all next week to discuss the restructuring of the board." As I walked out, leaving behind a room full of stunned, angry relatives, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I wasn't Emily the disappointment. I was Emily Carter, majority owner of Carter Industries. But power, I would soon discover, came with its own price. The library smelled of leather, paper, and the faint trace of my grandfather's pipe tobacco. I ran my fingers along the spines of first editions, rare manuscripts, and dog-eared paperbacks that had been his most treasured possessions. This room, with its floor-to-ceiling shelves and hidden reading nooks, had been my refuge growing up. "You're just like your father," grandfather would say, finding me curled up with a book while the rest of the family was at the country club. Back then, I thought it was criticism. Now I understood it had been his highest compliment. I pulled down a volume of Shakespeare and a folded photograph fell out, my father and grandfather standing in front of the original Carter Industries workshop, arms around each other's shoulders, beaming with pride. I'd never seen this picture before. On the back, in my grandfather's precise handwriting, "The day we changed everything, 1994. The family narrative had always been that my father was the irresponsible son who contributed nothing to the family legacy before his car accident. That his only accomplishment was marrying my mother, a marriage that produced the disappointing Emily and the promising Vanessa. My phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. "Vanessa. You can't possibly think you're qualified to run a multinational corporation," she said without preamble, her voice tight with controlled fury. I sat in grandfather's leather chair, remembering all the times I'd been told to get up because I wasn't the one who belonged there. "Hello to you too, Vanessa. This is ridiculous, Emily. You're going to destroy everything our family has built." A memory surfaced, my 16th birthday, when Vanessa convinced my grandfather not to let me have my party at the family lake house because I would embarrass everyone in front of the neighbors. "You mean everything you've taken credit for building?" I replied, surprising myself with my calm. "Did you know I submitted 3 different proposals for expanding our sustainable product line? Proposals that Uncle Stuart presented as his own last year." The silence on the other end told me she hadn't known, or worse, hadn't cared. "That's different," she finally said. "You were just an assistant. And now I'm your boss." I hung up, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't like me. The Emily they knew would have apologized, would have compromised, would have folded under the weight of family expectations. But I wasn't that Emily anymore. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Rebecca stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable in the library she'd probably never visited before. "The family's having an emergency meeting at Uncle Stuart's tonight," she said, twisting her diamond tennis bracelet nervously. "They wanted me to tell you, well, they said you can sell your shares back to the family for double their market value." I laughed, genuinely amused by their desperation. "And if I refuse?" Her perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together. "Emily, be reasonable. You don't want to make enemies of everyone." "They've never been my friends, Rebecca. Why would I care if they become my enemies?" She stepped further into the room, lowering her voice though we were alone. "They're saying things about you. About how you manipulated grandfather when he was sick, how you were always his favorite even though you never deserved it." The accusation stung, but less than I expected. I'd spent years trying to earn their approval, their acceptance. Now I realized I'd been validated by the only person whose opinion truly mattered, my grandfather. "Did you know I was the one who visited him every Sunday?" I asked. "Not for family dinners or holidays when everyone showed up, but every ordinary Sunday for the past 5 years." "Where were all of you?" Rebecca had the grace to look ashamed. "We were busy." "So was I. But I made time." She studied me with new eyes. "You've changed." "No," I corrected her. "I've just stopped pretending to be who you all wanted me to be." After she left, I wandered through the quiet mansion that had always felt more like a museum than a home. In the study, I found my grandfather's journal, the last entry dated just before he died. "Emily found the photograph today. She'll understand now why it had to be her. The others would destroy what James and I built, turn it into something soulless. Emily will remember what matters. I only wish I had stood up for her sooner." I closed the journal, tears blurring my vision. The photograph was still in my hand, my father and grandfather, their shared dream captured in a moment of pride before family politics poisoned everything. The house phone rang, shattering the silence. It was Mr. Burnham. "Miss Carter, I thought you should know that your uncle has contacted several attorneys about contesting the contract." I watched the sunset paint the library in shades of gold and shadow. "Let him try. These battles can get ugly, Miss Carter. Family disputes over business are never simple." "Nothing about my family has ever been simple, Mr. Burnham," I replied, tucking the photograph into my pocket. "But I'm ready for this fight." As night fell over the estate, I made a decision. I wouldn't sell a single share. I wouldn't compromise. For once in my life, I would stand firm, for myself, for my father's memory, and for the grandfather who had finally given me the means to reshape my reality. The war for Carter Industries had just begun, and I had 29 years of silent observation to guide my strategy. Monday morning arrived with a torrent of rain and a flurry of urgent emails. The Carter Industries headquarters loomed above the city skyline, its glass and steel facade reflecting the storm clouds gathering overhead. I stood in the lobby, rainwater dripping from my umbrella, staring at the massive family portrait that dominated the entryway. There was grandfather in the center, flanked by Uncle Stuart and Aunt Patricia. Vanessa stood proudly at his right hand. I was relegated to the edge of the frame, half hidden behind my cousin Rebecca. The photographer had suggested the arrangement, claiming it created visual balance. Now I understood it had been deliberate, a physical manifestation of my place in the family hierarchy. The receptionist did a double take when I approached her desk. "I'm Emily Carter. I have an appointment with the board at 9. Her eyes widened. "Of course, Miss Carter. They're expecting you in the main conference room." The elevator ride to the executive floor gave me time to steady my nerves. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a charcoal gray suit that belonged to my former life as an administrative assistant at Westbrook Industries, Carter's main competitor. Nothing flashy or expensive like Vanessa would wear, but professional and understated. I wanted them to underestimate me one last time. The conference room fell silent as I entered. Uncle Stuart sat at the head of the table, his habitual position despite grandfather's role as chairman until his death. The other board members, mostly family with a few trusted outsiders, watched me with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. "Emily," Stuart said, not bothering to rise. "We were just discussing the transition plan." "I'm sure you were." I took the empty seat at the opposite end of the table. "I've reviewed the company bylaws. As the holder of 50% of founding shares, I have the right to appoint a new chairperson following the death of the previous chair." Stuart's face reddened. "That's hardly necessary. As COO for the past 15 years. I nominate myself," I continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Does anyone second?" The room remained silent, exactly as I'd expected. "In the absence of a second," I said, opening my laptop, "the bylaws state that the largest shareholder automatically assumes the position until a formal vote can be arranged. Since my 50% outweighs any individual holdings in this room, I'll be serving as interim chair effective immediately." The stunned silence that followed was broken by Vanessa's laugh, a high, brittle sound that reflected her discomfort. "This is absurd," she said. "You've never even worked here." I smiled at her, the same placid smile I'd perfected over years of family gatherings where I was the butt of every joke. "Actually, I have. For the past month, I've been consulting with grandfather on a special project. He created a temporary position for me, Strategic Innovation Director." I projected my employee file onto the screen at the front of the room. There was my ID badge, my signed contract, even a photograph of me working in grandfather's private office. "He never mentioned this," Stuart sputtered. "He wasn't required to. As CEO, he had full authority to create new positions without board approval for trial periods of up to 90 days. I changed the slide to a comprehensive organizational chart of Carter Industries. I've spent the last month reviewing our operations, personnel, and financial positions. And I've found some concerning discrepancies. The atmosphere in the room shifted from dismissive to defensive in an instant. I highlighted 3 specific departments, all under Stuart's direct control. These divisions have reported losses for 3 consecutive quarters, despite industry trends showing growth in these exact sectors. I paused, letting the implications sink in. Either we're remarkably bad at what our competitors are succeeding at, or something else is happening to these funds. Stuart slammed his hand on the table. You're accusing me of embezzlement. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, I replied calmly. I'm stating facts that warrant further investigation. One of the non-family board members, Janet Levinson, a stern woman in her 60s who had always been fair to me at family functions, leaned forward. What exactly are you suggesting, Ms. Carter? A full audit of all departments, conducted by an independent firm. If everything is in order, wonderful. If not, we address it. This company has operated successfully for decades without your interference, Stuart growled. I met his gaze steadily. And yet our market share has decreased by 17% in the last 5 years while our main competitors have grown. Something isn't working, Uncle Stuart. Janet nodded slowly. I've raised similar concerns in the past. Stuart shot her a betrayed look. This is a family matter. No, I corrected him. This is a business matter. And that's the problem, you've all been treating Carter Industries like a family piggy bank instead of a corporation with shareholders, employees, and responsibilities. The words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. I closed my laptop and stood. I've scheduled the auditors to begin tomorrow. In the meantime, I'll be working from grandfather's office. Ms. Levinson, would you join me for coffee? I'd appreciate your insights on the board dynamics. As I walked out with Janet, I heard my uncle hissing urgently to the others. They were already planning their counterattack. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of their schemes and manipulations. Something had shifted inside me, a lifetime of swallowing injustices had finally reached its limit. In grandfather's office, my office now, Janet studied me with newfound respect. You know they'll fight you every step of the way. I nodded, running my hand along the edge of the massive oak desk. I'm counting on it. Why now, Emily? You could have taken the money they offered and lived comfortably without all this conflict. The question made me pause. Why had I chosen this path instead of the easier one? The answer came from a place deep inside me that had been silenced for too long. Because some things are worth fighting for, I said finally. Not the money or the power, but the truth. My father's legacy. The company as it was meant to be. Janet's expression softened. Your grandfather told me once that you were the only one who understood what Carter Industries was founded for. Not profit, but purpose. The filter technology was never just about making water cleaner, I agreed. It was about making lives better. For the first time, I felt the weight of my inheritance, not as a burden, but as a responsibility. The red folder had given me more than legal ownership, it had given me the chance to reclaim my voice, my place, and my purpose. As the rain continued to beat against the windows of what was now my office, I knew there would be no going back to the compliant, invisible Emily I had been. The awakening had begun, and with it, the real battle for Carter Industries. The audit results arrived 3 weeks later, landing on my desk with the weight of a bomb ready to detonate. I read through the findings twice, each page confirming what I had suspected but hoped wasn't true. Stuart had been systematically diverting company funds through a network of shell corporations for years. The amount totaled nearly $40 million. My office phone rang. Janet Levinson. Have you seen it? Her voice was tight with controlled anger. Yes. I rubbed my temples, fighting off a headache. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. They won't come, Janet said flatly. Stuart has convinced most of them you're on a witch hunt. I wasn't surprised. In the week since I'd taken over as interim chair, the family had closed ranks. Vanessa had spread rumors among our clients that I was mentally unstable. Rebecca had stopped taking my calls entirely. Even distant cousins who barely knew me had joined the campaign to undermine my authority. Then we'll hold the meeting with whoever shows up, I decided. The audit findings speak for themselves. After hanging up, I sat in the growing darkness of my office, watching the city lights come alive below. The isolation should have bothered me, but instead, I found it clarifying. All my life, I'd measured my worth by my family's approval. Now that it was completely withdrawn, I could finally see how little it had ever meant. My assistant knocked softly before entering with a stack of mail. These came for you, Miss Carter. And your sister is waiting in the lobby. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's insisting on seeing you. I sighed, unsurprised by Vanessa's tactics. She'd always believed rules didn't apply to her. Send her up. Vanessa swept into my office like she owned it, dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than most employees' monthly salary. Her eyes narrowed as she took in the changes I'd made to grandfather's space, the photographs of our father now displayed prominently, the sustainability awards I'd moved from storage to the walls, the stacks of product development proposals on my desk. This little power trip of yours has gone far enough, she announced, declining to sit when I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. Hello to you too, Vanessa. I continued sorting through my mail, refusing to give her the full attention she expected. If this is about the audit, we can discuss it at tomorrow's board meeting. This is about family loyalty, she hissed. Do you have any idea what you're doing to Uncle Stuart's reputation? To our family name? I looked up at her, struck by the realization that she truly didn't understand the severity of what had happened. Stuart stole $40 million, Vanessa. That's not a family matter, it's a criminal one. Her perfect composure cracked slightly. There must be some explanation. There is. He's a thief. And he's been using our family's trust to get away with it for years. You don't understand how business works at this level, she insisted. Sometimes funds need to be moved around for tax purposes. Tax evasion is also a crime. I stood, finally giving her my full attention. What part of this are you struggling with, Vanessa? Our uncle stole from the company. From us. From every employee who works here. Something flickered across her face, doubt, perhaps, or the first crack in her unwavering faith in the family hierarchy. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice smaller now. The right thing. We report the findings to the authorities and cooperate with any investigation. Stuart will likely face charges. The company will implement stronger financial controls. You'd send Uncle Stuart to prison. Your own blood. I studied my sister, beautiful, polished, and utterly incapable of seeing beyond the family mythology we'd been raised on. He made his choices, I said firmly. And now I'm making mine. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. You've always been jealous of me. Of all of us. This is your revenge. The accusation was so absurd I nearly laughed. This isn't about you, Vanessa. It never was. It's about doing what's right for the company, its employees, and its legacy. Grandfather would never have wanted this, she tried, a last desperate appeal. I opened my desk drawer and removed a sealed envelope with Vanessa's name on it, written in grandfather's shaky hand. I'd found it in the library, tucked inside his copy of King Lear. He left this for you. I think you should read it. She took the envelope hesitantly. What is it? His words, not mine. After she left, I turned back to the audit report, preparing notes for the board meeting that few would likely attend. My phone pinged with a text from Janet, only 3 confirmed for tomorrow. We need a new strategy. I texted back, Plan B, contact the SEC directly. I'll call our top shareholders tonight. This wasn't how I'd wanted things to go. Despite everything, these people were my family. I had hoped they would choose the company's integrity over blind loyalty to Stewart. But their refusal to face reality left me no choice. That night, I worked until midnight, calling major non-family shareholders to explain the situation before they heard it through office gossip. Most were stunned, some were angry, but all appreciated the transparency. As I was about to leave, Vanessa called. I read grandfather's letter, she said, her voice rough as if she'd been crying. I waited, giving her space to continue. He knew, she said finally. About Stewart. He suspected for years but couldn't prove it. Why didn't he do something? He tried. The board blocked him. Stewart had too many allies. That's why he set this up with you. He knew you were the only one strong enough to stand alone if necessary. The revelation settled over me like a mantle. Grandfather hadn't just given me power, he'd entrusted me with his final battle. Will you come tomorrow? I asked. To the board meeting. There was a long pause. Yes, she finally said. I'll be there. After we hung up, I stood at the window of my office, looking out at the city where Carter Industries had been a fixture for 3 generations. Tomorrow would change everything, for the company, for the family, and for me. There would be legal battles, public scrutiny, difficult decisions about the future of the business. But for the first time since I'd placed that red folder on the table at the will reading, I felt certain I was on the right path. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. I texted my assistant on my way out, have security ready tomorrow. And call Mr. Burnham first thing, we'll need his witness statement about the financial inconsistencies he observed in grandfather's final years. The war for Carter Industries was about to enter its most critical phase, and I was finally ready to fight it on my own terms. The boardroom felt cavernous with only 5 people seated at the massive table. Janet Levinson sat to my right, along with Harold Winters, our oldest board member who had been my grandfather's friend for 50 years. Across from us sat Vanessa, pale but composed, and to my surprise, Rebecca, who avoided meeting my eyes. Stewart's chair remained conspicuously empty. He's not coming, Vanessa confirmed, checking her watch. None of them are. I nodded, having expected as much. Then we proceed without them. This meeting is officially called to order. I distributed copies of the audit summary, giving everyone time to absorb the damning evidence. Harold's hands trembled as he read, his face growing increasingly ashen. I can't believe it, he murmured. James trusted him implicitly. We all did, Janet said, her voice hard with anger. Rebecca finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. What happens now? To the company? To Uncle Stewart? I laid out the facts as clearly as I could. The SEC will be notified. Criminal charges are likely. The company will need to issue a statement and cooperate fully with any investigation. There will be media coverage, stock volatility, and difficult questions from clients and partners. And the family? Vanessa asked quietly. That depends on the family, I replied. On who knew what, and when. On who's willing to stand for the company's integrity now. The weight of the moment hung in the air between us. This wasn't just about corporate governance or financial crimes. It was about the collapse of the carefully constructed facade our family had maintained for generations. I moved that we formally remove Stewart Carter from his position as Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately, Janet said, breaking the silence. Seconded, Harold added without hesitation. All in favor? I asked. 4 hands raised, Janet's, Harold's, Vanessa's, and my own. Rebecca kept her hands folded in her lap, tears streaming down her face. Motion carries, I confirmed. Now, regarding the public statement. The boardroom doors burst open with a crash. Stuart stormed in, his face contorted with rage, followed by Aunt Patricia and 3 other board members. "This meeting is illegitimate," he thundered. "You don't have quorum." "Actually, we do," Janet corrected calmly. "The bylaws state that emergency sessions require only 30% of board membership. We have that." Stuart ignored her, focusing his fury on me. "You ungrateful little nobody. After everything this family has done for you." I met his gaze steadily. "Done for me? Or to me? You were nothing without us. Your father was nothing. A dreamer with no business sense who would have bankrupted this company if your grandfather had let him anywhere near the operations." The room fell silent at the mention of my father. Even Aunt Patricia looked uncomfortable with Stuart's venom. "Is that why you erased him from the company history?" I asked, my voice level despite the anger burning in my chest. "Why you destroyed the evidence of his contributions? Why you spent years convincing everyone he was worthless?" Stuart's laugh was ugly. "He was worthless. Just like you." I stood slowly, placing both hands on the table. "My father created the original filtration design that made this company what it is today. And you've been stealing the profits from his invention for years." "You can't prove that," he sneered. "Actually, I can." I nodded to Janet, who pressed a button on her tablet. The screen at the end of the room lit up with a video of my grandfather, recorded in his final weeks, his face gaunt but his eyes clear and determined. "My name is James Carter," he began, his voice stronger than it had been in person during those last days. "I am recording this statement regarding the true origins of Carter Industries' core technology and the financial mismanagement I have observed within the company." For 15 excruciating minutes, my grandfather detailed everything: how my father had developed the groundbreaking filtration system, how Stuart had gradually taken credit after my father's death, and how he had discovered financial irregularities but been blocked from investigating them by Stuart's allies on the board. When the video ended, Stuart's face had lost all color. Aunt Patricia had sunk into a chair, her usual imperious expression replaced by shock. "You doctored that," Stuart accused, but his voice lacked conviction. "The original is already with our attorneys," I replied. "Along with supporting documentation grandfather preserved." "It's over, Stuart." He lunged across the table, reaching for me with rage-blind desperation, but Harold and Janet moved quickly to restrain him. Security appeared at the door, summoned by my assistant who had been monitoring the situation. "Stuart Carter, you are terminated from Carter Industries, effective immediately," I stated formally. "Security will escort you from the building. Your access to all company systems has already been revoked." As they led him away, still shouting threats and accusations, I remained standing at the head of the table. Aunt Patricia and the other board members who had arrived with Stuart sat in stunned silence. "The rest of you have a choice to make," I told them. "You can resign now, with dignity, or you can stay and help rebuild this company the right way. But know that there will be a full investigation into who enabled Stuart's actions over the years. There will be consequences." One by one, they filed out of the room until only Vanessa, Rebecca, Janet, and Harold remained. Rebecca finally spoke, her voice small. "I didn't know. About the money, I swear I didn't know." "I believe you," I said, and I meant it. Rebecca had always been more of a follower than an instigator in the family dynamics. "What happens to us now?" Vanessa asked. "To the family." I looked at my sister, the golden child who had spent a lifetime being told she was superior to me in every way. There was no triumph in seeing her so diminished, only a profound sadness for everything our family could have been. "That's up to each of you," I said. "The company will survive this. Whether our relationships do is another matter entirely." As the others left to begin the difficult process of damage control, I remained alone in the boardroom, surrounded by the trappings of power that had meant everything to my family and so little to me. I thought of my grandfather's final gift, not the shares or the position, but the truth. And the courage to stand by it, whatever the cost. The red folder sat on the table before me, its contents now known to all. What had started as a symbol of my exclusion had become the key to my liberation. Not just from Stuart's financial crimes, but from the prison of family expectations that had confined me for 29 years. My phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Burnham. SEC investigators want to meet tomorrow. You've done the right thing, Emily. I wasn't so sure everyone would agree. But for the first time in my life, the only approval I needed was my own. 6 months later. The new Carter Industries headquarters was smaller than the old one, a renovated warehouse in the Sustainable Development District rather than the gleaming skyscraper downtown. Sunlight streamed through the skylights, illuminating the open workspaces where engineers and designers collaborated on the next generation of filtration technology. I walked through the main floor, stopping to chat with employees, many of whom I now knew by name. After the scandal broke, we'd lost almost 30% of our workforce in the restructuring. Some had left in protest over Stuart's arrest, others had been let go when we discovered how deeply the financial mismanagement had penetrated various departments. Rebuilding had been painful but necessary. We were leaner now, more focused on innovation than expansion. Our stock price had finally stabilized after months of volatility, and our new transparency policies had begun restoring client confidence. Ms. Carter, your 10 o'clock is waiting in the conference room, my assistant called as I passed her desk. Thank you, Denise. Any word from the foundation? They approved the grant proposal. The first community water project breaks ground next month. I smiled, feeling a surge of satisfaction. The Carter Clean Water Foundation had been my first major initiative as CEO, dedicating a percentage of profits to installing our filtration systems in communities with limited access to clean water. It was exactly the kind of purpose-driven project my father and grandfather had envisioned when they created the original technology. In the conference room, Janet Levinson was deep in conversation with our new COO, a brilliant woman we'd recruited from a smaller competitor. They were reviewing the quarterly projections, which showed modest but sustainable growth. Good morning, I said, joining them at the table. How do we look? On target, the COO confirmed. The new residential line is performing better than expected. And the industrial contracts are holding steady. Janet smiled approvingly. A far cry from where we were 6 months ago. That was an understatement. After Stuart's arrest, we discovered the financial damage was even worse than the audit had indicated. Restructuring the company had required painful cuts, honest conversations with shareholders, and a complete reimagining of our business model. Have you seen this? Janet asked, sliding a business magazine across the table. The cover featured a photo of me standing in our new research lab, under the headline, The Resurrection of Carter Industries, How Emily Carter Salvaged a Family Legacy. I set it aside without reading it. I'd given the interview weeks ago but had no interest in revisiting that painful period. Any word from Vanessa? Janet asked carefully. She's still in Europe, I replied. The last email said she's considering coming back for the holidays, but I'm not holding my breath. After the scandal, Vanessa had retreated to our family's house in Switzerland, unable to face the social fallout of Stuart's arrest and the company's restructuring. Our relationship remained complicated, a fragile truce rather than a true reconciliation. She had apologized, in her way, for years of dismissing me. But some wounds were too deep to heal completely. And Rebecca? Starting at the foundation next week, I said, unable to hide my surprise at how that had evolved. She's actually quite good at community outreach. Who knew? My cousin had been the most unexpected ally in the aftermath. Once freed from Stuart and Patricia's influence, she had revealed a genuine interest in the company's philanthropic efforts. Our relationship had evolved into something like friendship, tentative but growing stronger. The meeting proceeded efficiently, as they always did now. No power plays, no hidden agendas, just professionals focused on building something worthwhile. Afterward, I returned to my office, a modest space with glass walls that reflected my commitment to transparency. On my desk sat a framed photograph of my father and grandfather, standing proudly in front of their workshop. Beside it was a newer addition, a picture taken at the opening of our new headquarters 3 months ago, showing me cutting the ribbon, flanked by Janet, Rebecca, Harold, and several key employees. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca, "Lunch today. I have ideas for the foundation launch." I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. These small normal interactions still felt novel sometimes, family communications not laden with judgment or competition. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Harold entered, looking more energetic than he had in months. "Emily, have you had a chance to review the proposal from that young engineer in R&D? The one with the modification to the portable unit?" I nodded. "It's brilliant. I've already approved moving it to prototype." Harold beamed with pride. He had taken on mentoring our newest engineers, passing along the institutional knowledge that might otherwise have been lost in the transition. "Your father would have loved this place," he said, gesturing to the bustling workspace visible through my glass walls. "The energy, the purpose. It's what he and your grandfather always wanted." "I know." The words came easier now, without the ache that had accompanied thoughts of my father for so many years. "And he would have been proud of you. James too." I felt my throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Thank you, Harold." After he left, I opened my laptop to review the draft of our quarterly shareholder letter. A notification popped up, an email from Vanessa with the subject line, "Coming home." I took a deep breath before opening it. Inside was a brief message, "Booked my flight for next week. Would like to see the new headquarters if that's okay. Things to say in person. V." I typed a simple response, "You're always welcome here." As I sent it, I realized I meant it. Not because I'd forgotten the past or fully forgiven everything, but because I'd finally established the boundaries that allowed me to engage with my family on my own terms. The red folder sat in a frame on my wall now, a reminder not of betrayal or revenge, but of transformation. Of the moment I'd stopped allowing others to define my worth and started defining it for myself. Outside my office, Carter Industries hummed with purpose. Inside, I was finally at peace with who I was, not the family disappointment, not the overlooked daughter, but Emily Carter, a woman who had found the strength to reclaim her voice and reshape her reality. And that, I realized, was the greatest inheritance my grandfather could have given me.